I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She had just agreed to meet him alone, knowing her entire family would crumble if anyone found out, and knowing she couldn't stop herself anymore. My name is Margaret, and at 67 years old, I did something I never thought possible. I destroyed the life I'd spent 4 decades building. And the worst part? Even now sitting here telling you this, I'm not sure I regret it. Not completely. Let me go back to where this started, because you need to understand, I wasn't looking for this. I wasn't one of those women who felt unfulfilled or trapped. My life with Robert was comfortable. We'd been married for 42 years. We had 3 grown children, 7 grandchildren, and a brick colonial in Westchester County that we'd finally paid off 5 years ago. Robert retired from his accounting firm, I'd left my teaching position, and we were supposed to be enjoying our golden years together. But comfortable isn't the same as alive. I remember the exact moment I realized I'd become invisible. It was at our granddaughter Emma's birthday party, and I'd spent the entire morning baking her favorite chocolate cake from scratch. When I brought it out, everyone praised it for maybe 10 seconds before moving on to other things. Robert was on his phone checking stock prices. My daughter Linda was managing the chaos of children. My son Michael was arguing with his wife about something trivial, and I just stood there, holding the cake knife, realizing that I'd become part of the furniture in my own life. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my laptop and created a Facebook account. If you're wondering whether that's where this all started, you'd be right, but not in the way you think. I started browsing through old high school classmates, college friends, former teaching colleagues. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Vacation photos, political rants, pictures of grandchildren. But then I saw a friend request from someone I didn't immediately recognize, Daniel Whitmore. The profile picture showed a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and kind eyes, standing in front of what looked like the Grand Canyon. I clicked on his profile, and suddenly I was 23 years old again. Daniel had been my supervisor during my first teaching position at Roosevelt Elementary in Newark. Back then, he was 35, recently divorced, and had this way of making everyone in the teacher's lounge feel like their opinions mattered. I'd had what I told myself was just an innocent crush, the kind every young teacher develops for an older mentor. Nothing ever happened between us. I married Robert 2 years later, Daniel eventually remarried, and our paths diverged completely. I accepted his friend request without thinking too much about it. His first message came 3 days later. It was simple, friendly, nothing that should have made my heart race the way it did. Margaret, I can't believe I found you. How has life been treating you? I think about the Roosevelt days often. You were one of the brightest young teachers I ever worked with. We started messaging back and forth, casual at first, updates about our lives, our families, our careers. He told me he was widowed now. His second wife had passed away from cancer 4 years ago. He'd retired from education and was living in Asheville, North Carolina, spending his time hiking and volunteering at literacy programs. And he asked about me. Really asked. Not the surface-level, "How are you?" that Robert mumbled while reading the newspaper. Daniel wanted to know what I thought about things, what I was reading, what dreams I'd let go of over the years. I should have seen the danger. I should have stopped. But when someone sees you after years of being invisible, it's like oxygen to someone who's been drowning. The messages became daily, then twice daily. Then we moved to email because the Facebook messages felt too public, too easily discovered. Robert never looked at my computer, but still, I started deleting the emails after reading them. That should have been my first sign that I knew what I was doing was wrong. Daniel started calling me. Just his voice on the other end of the line made me feel like a different person. We'd talk for hours when Robert was at his weekly poker game or playing golf. Daniel told me about his life, his regrets, his loneliness. And I told him things I'd never told anyone, how sometimes I felt like my entire identity had been absorbed into being Robert's wife and my children's mother. How I couldn't remember the last time Robert had asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer. How I'd wake up some mornings and wonder if this was all there was going to be until I died. 6 weeks after that first message, Daniel said something that changed everything. "Margaret, I need to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't ruin our friendship. but I've been thinking about you constantly since we reconnected. I realize now that even back at Roosevelt, I felt something for you that I told myself was inappropriate. You were young, you were engaged, and I was your supervisor. But now we're both free adults, both alone in different ways, and I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. My hands shook as I read that email. I must have reread it 50 times. I knew I should have ended it right there. Told him we needed to stop communicating. Blocked his number, deleted his emails, and focused on my marriage. Instead, I wrote back, I feel it too. I've always felt it. And just like that, I stepped across a line I couldn't uncross. We started video calling late at night. I'd tell Robert I was having trouble sleeping and would go down to the den. Daniel and I would talk until 2 or 3 in the morning. We weren't doing anything physical. We were 800 miles apart, but the emotional intimacy was deeper than anything I'd experienced in decades. He made me laugh. He challenged my thoughts. He remembered details about things I'd mentioned in passing weeks earlier. When I told him I'd always wanted to learn to paint but had never made time for it, he sent me a complete watercolor set with a note that said, "It's never too late to become who you might have been." I started painting. Terrible paintings at first, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was doing something just for myself. Robert noticed the art supplies but barely commented. "That's nice, Maggie," he said, using the nickname I'd always hated. Keeping busy. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to shake him and ask when he'd stopped seeing me. But instead, I just smiled and said, "Yes, keeping busy." The lie had started to feel more comfortable than the truth. Then Daniel suggested we meet in person. "Just for coffee," he said. Neutral territory. There was a town in Virginia, roughly halfway between us. We could meet at a cafe, spend a few hours catching up face to face, and then return to our separate lives. I knew what that meeting would mean. I knew I was playing with fire. But when you felt invisible for so long, the promise of being seen, really seen, becomes intoxicating. I told Robert I was going to visit my college roommate Patricia in Richmond for the weekend. He didn't question it. He never questioned anything anymore. I don't think he would have noticed if I'd said I was going to the moon. The drive to Charlottesville took 6 hours. I had 6 hours to turn around, 6 hours to come to my senses, 6 hours to save my marriage. But I kept driving. I saw Daniel before he saw me. He was sitting at an outdoor table at a cafe near the University of Virginia, looking at his phone. The afternoon sunlight caught his silver hair, and when he looked up and our eyes met, something inside me that had been dormant for decades suddenly roared to life. We spent 8 hours together that day. We walked through the university grounds. We had dinner at a small Italian restaurant. We talked about everything and nothing, and when he walked me back to my car as the sun was setting, he took my hand. Just that. He took my hand, and I let him. "I don't want to complicate your life, Margaret," he said softly. "But I also can't pretend that these past few months haven't meant everything to me. You've made me feel alive again." I should have said goodbye. I should have gotten in my car and driven home and confessed everything to Robert and begged for forgiveness and worked on my marriage. Instead, I said, "When can I see you again?" We started meeting once a month. I'd invent various excuses. Visiting old friends, attending a retired teachers' conference, helping Patricia with some made-up project. Robert never suspected anything, or if he did, he never said a word. Daniel and I would meet in different cities. We'd spend the day together, talking, walking, existing in a bubble where the rest of our lives didn't matter. We held hands, we kissed, not passionately, but tenderly, like two people who'd found something precious and rare. We never went further than that. It wasn't about physical desire, though that was certainly present. It was about feeling chosen, feeling valued, feeling like I mattered to someone. But the guilt was eating me alive. I'd come home from these meetings, and Robert would ask how Patricia was doing, and I'd spin elaborate lies while my stomach churned. I'd sit at family dinners with my children and grandchildren, and all I could think about was how they'd look at me if they knew. I'd lie awake at night next to my husband of 42 years, listening to him snore, wondering who I'd become. Then came the message I'd been dreading. Daniel wanted me to leave Robert. Not immediately, he said, but he wanted us to build a real life together. We weren't kids anymore, he said. How many years did we have left? Why should we spend them apart and miserable when we could spend them together and happy? I told him I needed time to think. That's when everything fell apart. My daughter Linda had been planning a surprise birthday party for me. She'd called the house during the day when she thought I'd be home, but I was actually 3 hours away meeting Daniel. Robert mentioned it that evening, how Linda had called and seemed disappointed to miss me. "Where were you today?" he asked, just casually while reading the newspaper. "Oh, I just ran some errands," I said. "You know how it is." He folded down the corner of his newspaper and looked at me, really looked at me, in a way he hadn't in years. "Margaret, is there something you want to tell me?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I'm not blind. You've been different these past few months. Happier, but also distant. You're always on your phone. You take these trips without much explanation. The other day I saw you'd received flowers from someone, but you never mentioned them." The watercolor set. I'd told him they were from Patricia. "Robert, Is there someone else?" The question hung in the air between us like something with weight and substance. I could have lied. I probably should have lied. But suddenly I was so tired of lying. "Yes," I whispered. I've never seen anyone's face change like Robert's did in that moment. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Everything that had held up his understanding of his life, of our life, just crumbled. "How long?" His voice was barely audible. 6 months. "But Robert, it's not what you—" 6 months. He stood up. His hands were shaking. 6 months you've been lying to me. 6 months you've been— Who is he? I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up completely. Do I know him? Is it someone from church? One of our neighbors? One of my golf buddies? His voice was rising now, something I'd almost never heard in 4 decades of marriage. Who is he, Margaret? Someone from a long time ago, before we were married. We reconnected online and you decided to throw away 42 years of marriage? For what? Some old flame who probably fed you a bunch of lines about how special you are? It's not like that, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if he was right. Had I been fooled? Had Daniel seen a lonely, vulnerable woman and taken advantage? No. It had been real. What we had was real. But so was this, the pain on Robert's face, the marriage I'd betrayed. The life I'd blown apart. I want you to leave, Robert said quietly. I can't look at you right now. I can't be in the same room with you. I want you to pack a bag and leave. Robert, please, get out of my house. I spent that night in a Holiday Inn off Route 287, crying until I couldn't cry anymore. I called Daniel, and he was supportive, loving, everything I needed him to be. But there was also something else in his voice, a kind of satisfaction maybe, that things had finally come to a head. The next morning, my phone started ringing. Linda, then Michael, then my youngest, Sarah. Robert had told them everything. Linda was devastated. How could you do this to Dad? After everything he's done for you, after all these years? Michael was angry. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to him? To all of us? What are we supposed to tell people? Sarah just cried. My baby, now 36 years old with children of her own, crying like she had when she was little. I don't understand, Mom. I thought you and Dad were happy. Was it all fake? Was our whole family fake? I tried to explain. But how do you explain something you don't fully understand yourself? How do you tell your children that love isn't always enough? That sometimes people drift apart so gradually they don't notice until the distance is impossible to cross? That their mother felt like she was disappearing and someone made her feel real again? You can't. There are no words that make it better. Robert filed for divorce within a month. My children stopped calling. The grandchildren, I wasn't allowed to see them unsupervised. Linda actually said that to me. I don't think it's appropriate for you to be alone with them right now. As if I were dangerous. As if I might corrupt them somehow. The community I'd lived in for 30 years turned cold. Women I'd had coffee with for decades stopped responding to texts. Our couple's friends chose Robert's side, which I understood but still hurt. I'd go to the grocery store and people would literally turn their shopping carts around to avoid me in the aisles. I moved to a small apartment in Yonkers. Started seeing Daniel more regularly since I was no longer hiding anything. But something had shifted. The magic that existed when we were stolen moments and secret phone calls had dimmed in the harsh light of reality. He was still kind, still attentive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd given up everything for something that might not have been as substantial as I'd believed. Or maybe I was just drowning in guilt and couldn't let myself be happy. 3 months after I moved out, Robert had a heart attack. Not fatal, thank God, but serious enough that he needed surgery. Linda called to tell me, her voice ice cold. "I thought you should know, not that you probably care." "Of course I care," I said. "Can I come to the hospital?" "Dad doesn't want to see you. None of us do." I went anyway. I sat in the parking lot of Northern Westchester Hospital for 6 hours, not going in, just being close. Knowing my children were up there with their father, the man I'd shared most of my adult life with, and I wasn't welcome. That's when I finally understood what I'd done. Not just the affair, not just the lying, but the fracture I'd created in my family that might never heal. My grandchildren would grow up with a different understanding of their grandmother. Family gatherings would forever be divided. The story our family told about itself had been rewritten, and I was the villain. Daniel asked me to move to Asheville with him. "Start fresh," he said. "Build a new life." I said I needed more time. The truth is, I don't know what I need. I don't know if what Daniel and I have is real enough to sustain a life together, or if it was only magical because it was forbidden. I don't know if I threw away my marriage for something real, or if I just destroyed everything because I was selfish and scared of growing old and visible. I don't know if my children will ever forgive me. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself. What I do know is this. I felt invisible, and someone made me feel seen, and I chose that feeling over everything else. And now I have to live with that choice every single day. Robert and I are divorced now. The house is sold. He's already dating someone. A widow from his church group, apparently. Linda told me this like she wanted it to hurt, and it did, but not in the way she probably expected. I was relieved. Relieved that he was moving on, that maybe I hadn't destroyed him completely. I still see Daniel. We spend weekends together. We talk about maybe getting a place together. But there's something neither of us acknowledges. A question that hangs between us unspoken. Was this worth it? I'm 67 years old. I spent 42 years building a life, and I tore it down in 6 months. I have a man who loves me, but I've lost almost everyone else who mattered. I'm free, but I've never felt more trapped. Trapped by guilt, by regret, by the knowledge that I can never undo what I've done. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never accepted that friend request, if I'd stayed invisible but safe, if I'd worked harder on my marriage instead of running towards something that made me feel alive. But I can't go back. None of us can go back. So I move forward, day by day, carrying this weight. Some days I think I made the right choice, that life is too short to spend it unseen and unheard. Other days I think I made the most selfish, destructive choice of my life. Most days I honestly don't know. My daughter Sarah called me last week, just for a minute. She said she's trying to understand, trying to work through her anger. She said she doesn't know if we'll ever have the relationship we used to have, but maybe we can build something new. It was the first piece of hope I'd felt in months. And Daniel is good to me. He really is. Whatever happens, I believe he genuinely loves me. Whether that love is enough to balance out everything I've lost, I guess time will tell. What I want you to understand is this. I'm not telling you this story to justify what I did. I'm not looking for sympathy or absolution. I'm telling you because I need someone to know the whole truth. Not the version my children have, where I'm simply the villain who destroyed the family. Not the version Daniel has, where I'm a woman who finally chose happiness. The real version, where I'm just someone who made impossible choices and is still figuring out what they mean. If you're watching this and you're in a marriage that feels empty, that feels like you're slowly disappearing, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can't. But I will say this. Whatever you choose, make sure you can live with it. Make sure you can look at yourself in the mirror and know who you're looking at. Make sure you're choosing from strength, not fear or loneliness. Because once you cross certain lines, you can never uncross them. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd chosen differently. I'm Margaret, and at 67 years old, I felt chosen again, for the first time in decades, and it cost me almost everything. Was it worth it? Ask me again in 5 years. Maybe by then I'll know the answer.